Yeah. So recently we noticed this whole change with the brand, with the website, with the Instagram page of how there's a certain shift in the brand. And so everyone wants to know like why this is happening and why now and why such shift in the brand Garuda itself.
All right, so there's like multiple different answers to the whole question. Some of them are like very practical, and some of them are like completely emotional. I'll talk about like the more emotional side of things. One is that basically because of everything that's going on, like in a world sense, we wanted to drop all military references from the clothing completely. That's number one. From a practical sense, we have never focused on a market before, and we want to choose a market to focus in, and we're choosing India, right? So if you're choosing India as a market, you have to think of it as you have to evaluate the design landscape of India, right? And basically, the design landscape of India is a spectrum with two extremes and almost nothing in the middle, right? The two extremes are that you have younger brands who are bringing in Western trends into the country, and then you have ethnic brands who are making the same thing for the last 200, 300 years with no innovation at all, apart from maybe color or style of embroidery. So these are the two things that we wanted to address if we wanted to enter this market. That one, if you're going to claim this Indian streetwear title, actually reference India. And if you're going to reference India and make these ethnic influence garments, actually push them forward from a pattern cutting and a sewing perspective, as opposed to just color and embroidery. So that's what's inspired the whole change in direction. It's a complete change in ethos that's inspired this whole change in direction.
Right. So you talked about how you are now focusing on a market.
Yeah.
So what made you focus on India specifically, and why you're focusing on the Indian marketing or getting inspiration from the Indian culture when earlier you were focusing on a much more world level?
All right, so like obviously people think that we were only catering to overseas, right? Yeah. But I believe as a designer, your job is to make the product that you wish to see in the world. So that's what I've always done, right? So I made the product that I wish to see in the world for the last 7 years. And it was just a coincidence that the world market responded and the Indian market didn't respond, right? Why am I choosing India as a market this time? It's because if you look back at the history of the brand, there's always been Indian references in the brand. The very first product we released was called Sipahi pants. The second product we ever released was called the Manford shirt, which was a retake on a kurta. So realistically, like, Indian references have been in the brand since day one. It's just we're doubling down on it now. And why we're choosing India as a market, it's because we live here and we have been here for the last 5 years because of the factory. And it just makes sense from like that perspective. And making clothes and everything like that is a service. And it's like about servitude in a way. So we want to be in service to India for the first time ever. And we want to make our product accessible to Indian people, because I know that Indian people are interested in the product, but maybe price point or the unviability of the materials in the Indian climate has scared them off. But we want Garuda to be accessible to Indian people.
Makes sense. So now we can expect more of the Indian fabrics and the Indian price point, I believe.
Yeah. So obviously, as a result of us reducing the basically, like, if we're not using Swiss fabrics, right, and we're paying a lower cost for the fabrics, obviously that is a result on wholesale price and also retail price as well, right? So obviously everything is going to become cheaper as a result because we're using these Indian textiles which are more readily available that than, for example, like Swiss textiles that we have to pay like thousands of rupees a meter for.
Right. So now another question comes up is what should we expect from the new collection? And like, are we still gonna go around with so we are definitely not going with the military references. So is it going to be something much more variable to the daily life? And finally, is it still going to be made to measure how it used to be with Garuda, or are the things changing now?
So wearability, we focused on basically taking like Indian silhouettes and reinventing them, right? From a pattern cutting and sewing perspective. So realistically, like silhouette wise, it's something that's like very familiar to the eye. But pattern cutting and sewing wise, it's completely different from what Indian people are used to, right? Wearability wise, Garuda has always been about like wearable products, right? So the individual products themselves are like very wearable, right? But if you start putting them all together, it does become like a bit chaotic because there's so many layers and so many different fabrics and so many features that are just going on, right? So the wearability really depends on how far your comfort level is. But if you buy an individual product, is it going to fit with the rest of your wardrobe? Yes. But if you buy the whole wardrobe and try to style it all at once, are you going to stand out of the crowd? Yes. Is that good for some people? Yes. Is that bad for some people? Yes. So that's just the way it is. In terms of the made to order, made to measure stuff, so we're staying a made to order brand. But however, we're stopping made to measure. Reason being because of the complexity of the patterns that we're dealing with this time. Because we wanted to reinvent Indian silhouettes, which are very drapey by default, we had to create these very like dynamic and adaptive patterns that work with different body types and different body shapes and everything like that, right? So as a result, the patterns are very complex. Like for example, we have a pair of pants that are cut from one piece of fabric, which is completely ridiculous, like in like the general sense of tailoring, right? So that's just not a pattern that's possible to adapt to different body types based on measurements. So we have to offer ready-to-wear sizing for that.
Makes sense. So another thing was like we have seen Garuda and we have observed how the garments go about. So the color, if you talk about the colors, it has mostly been black. Is that something that we're going to see change in the future, or is it something we're sticking to?
So for this collection, it's completely black, except for the accessories. And there's 4 accessories, and only 3 of them are black. 3 of them are colored, right? 1 of them is black. So maybe next collection, which will be around November, we'll start exploring these same silhouettes in different colors. But for the time being, it is just black. And obviously I get the question a lot from people like, why do you only wear black? Why do you only design in black? And the answer is very simple. It's just like, I think it makes it more interesting because if I have color to play with, I can take your eyes wherever I want them to go. But if I only have one color to play with, I have to be extremely creative with silhouette and cut and texture. And that's the reason that we always design in black. But we will approach color and different fabric variants in the November remix collection.
So about the accessories, so what are we going to see now? Is it something that is inspired from the Indian culture or is very appropriate for the Indian culture, or is it something which is entirely different? Like what should we expect?
So like for example, the accessories are all named after Indian things. Like for example, you have the potli, the thela, the chunni, and the topi, right? Which means in order pouch, bag, like a scarf, and a hat, right? So they're all named after Indian things, but we've just recontextualized them. So for example, the chunni is actually made from a hand-knitted crochet lamb's wool, but shape-wise, it's still a chunni at the end of the day, and it still serves the same purpose. Yeah, so all the items are Indian inspired in a way. And the potli, for example, while the name comes from India and the fabric is an Indian fabric, the inspiration from that actually came from like video games. So like, for example, in like medieval RPG games, you have like a spherical coin pouch or a potion pouch. And that's the shape that we were trying to recreate essentially. So yes and no is the answer to that question essentially. Yeah.
About the collection, because everyone is very excited for the collection. So there are total around 16 garments from what we have read. Yeah. So are these all garments specifically to a certain type of garment, or are they varied, or are they just the jackets? Like what can we expect?
So I think from memory there's 4 bottoms, 3 tops, 3 jackets, 4 accessories, and yeah, I think that's everything.
So we are covering the whole spectrum of like all types of garments in one would wear.
And like every garment is like very intentionally made, right? For example, you have like a product like the koti, which is a sweater, right? So that serves as a mid layer. Then you have the Nehru jacket, which is an insulated piece, so it serves as an insulator and a mid layer again. Then you have the coat and the jacket pieces, which are outer layers, which are waterproof as well. And then you have the base layers that are made from muslin, because like 1,000 years ago in India, before people put on layers of silk or linen, they put muslin next to their skin first. So that's another reference to like Indian like Vedic times and Gupta times, right? So the whole spectrum is covered, and even in terms of like wearability, the whole spectrum is covered. So for example, we have like a pair of pants called the salwar, which is like essentially like a women's version of a harem pant in India, right? So that is our very wide and cropped and drapey pant. And then for the complete opposite effect, we have just the one that's called pant. And it's pant without an S, because it's a reference to like my masis and everything always calling it pant, right? So that one is a very like slim fit at the thigh, but then flared fit, but then it comes with a zipper option to taper it in, and an additional option of a cinch at the ankle to taper it even more. So this serves as the complete opposite of the salwar. So we've covered the whole spectrum as far as possible.
Right, like I'm hearing words like salwar and then Nehru jacket. Salwar is something that we have commonly seen on women in India, and Nehru jacket is something very common in males. So like I'm still very much confused. Who are we targeting? Who is Garuda targeting now?
Everyone. So my mom taught me how to cut and sew, right? And she's been asking me to do women's wear for like 4 years. But I just can't do it for whatever reason. Like I have a mental block when it comes to women's wear for whatever reason. So I've just decided to completely create a genderless collection. And thankfully, Indian silhouettes lend themselves very well to genderless. And I mean genuinely genderless. I'm not talking about putting a man in a skirt and putting a woman in a blazer. I mean, these clothes can be worn by anyone.
What are we focusing on? Would we be looking at certain trends in the collection, or is it going to be certain staple pieces? Like, what can we expect in that manner?
Trends or staple pieces, you mean? I mean, and I think it's on trend for like people who dress in ethnic fashion in India. But is it on trend for what younger people are wearing in India? Not necessarily. But do I hope that younger people will wear it? Yes. And in terms of staples, I think like a product like the banyan, which is just a tank top, like very long and drapey, could very well become a staple. And then also a piece like the kacha, which is a pair of like harem shorts. So it's based on the same pattern as the salwar, but cropped obviously to short length. I feel that could become a staple as well, because it's made in linen, so it's very friendly for like the climate in India. So trends wise, I mean, it focuses more on like what the older generation in India wear, like ethnic clothes. But we're trying to push these products to like breaking point, pattern cutting and sewing wise, and really make younger people appreciate the amount of work that's gone into remaking something. Because I think that's the context, right? That maybe younger people are more focused on these outside trends because they haven't seen anything new in their own culture fashion wise for a long time. And that's what we're trying to do. Bring something new to these old things. So like, you know, like a quote from like some of our copywriting practice that we did was that the most beautiful things are created from those already standing. And that's like a good synopsis of what's going on.
Great. And finally, do you think the Indian market is ready for, or the Indian consumer is ready for such elaborate and so much time and effort invested in garments, and rather than a graphic t-shirt or something that is very, very common nowadays?
I don't think it's about people being ready or not ready. I think it's about people deserving it. And I think people deserve it. People deserve people to put effort into the product. and people deserve to have their story told through product. And yeah, people deserve this product. That's the reason that we're making it. Because this is the product that we think is missing out there, and the product that people need. Hence, we've put in all the effort and hours. Like, literally 5 people have put in over 100 hours into this. So is at least 500 hours, probably 1,000 hours in this whole collection at the very minimum, right? And we've done that because we think that people need this. And whether they're ready or not, it's coming.